live. And we'll be live in a minute and then I'll introduce you. Good. And we are. Hi, I'm Metta Spencer. And today I get a treat. I get to talk to an old friend. By an old friend, I mean a friend I've known for, my God, what is it, 25 years?
Since 1983.
You remember.
That's when I took your introductory sociology course at U of T.
Isn't that great? It should be remembered that way is already a treat for me. This is Marianne Larson, who was a student of mine, and she was in a course that I was giving, I don't know, what introduction to peace studies, I gather. And she certainly took it to heart because she's gone on and done peace studies and done all kinds of activism ever since. She worked for me for a year or so. Yep. And then she went on and became a teacher, was teaching in sort of an alternative high school or That's something right. in Toronto. Was that called Seed or something different? It was something different, wasn't it?
I taught at City School and Oasis. Those were both public alternative schools, high schools in Toronto.
Do they still have such things?
Yes, they do.
I haven't talked to anybody who's ever gotten near one in a long time, but I know you were doing that. And then you went on and did a PhD or something, in a doctorate in education.
That's right.
And have you taught at Trent first and then Brock? No, not Brock, then Western. So you became a professor of education at Western University in London, Ontario, where you're living now.
That's right.
And you've had many other adventures. I will only allude to one because I know you want to talk mostly about all your grassroots work and that of the people that you know in grassroots activism. But I have to mention the unusual situation that somebody died and left you a pot of money, a whole pile of money, and you have become a philanthropist, donating this money over the years. I noticed that back 10 years or more ago, you donated $1 million to HIV work in Africa. And I think you work with young women, young girls, supporting underprivileged or disadvantaged young women. Is that right?
That's all right.
Okay, gotcha.
Well done in summarizing my crazy life.
Well, no, I haven't got to the big juicy part yet, which is that you're running for the Green Party.
Hoping to, yes.
Yeah, that's you know, you've retired as a professor, so I gather you have enough time on your hands to do additional good work, which is amazing to me because I saw your CV and I tell you, it really knocked me over. It's really astounding how much work you have done in local organizations that you know, activists and volunteers participate in. So you're really an expert on that. So I want to say, boy, you are really somebody I'm going to take credit for. You. You're my prize student. All right.
You do that because you've been such a mentor for me, Metta. So thank you, and an inspiration. I mean, I could say just as many wonderful things back to you too, but I know the focus is on me and the work I'm doing today, but thank you.
Well, we're going to talk about your work, and that's just glorious. It's just a real treat. Okay. Let's get to, your name is Marianne Larson, and you're living in London, Ontario, and you've retired from Western University. So let's talk about the other amazing things that you've worked on all these years. What in the world have you, how did you get inspired and engaged in all of this local community work?
I actually have to say that it's nothing new. I think ever since I was a young girl, I grew up in Oakville. I was always organizing groups of kids and doing volunteer work. One of the things that I was very passionate about as a adolescent, and I've kind of circled back to it, is around animal rights and justice for animals and the humane treatment of animals. So, and that is something that I've now brought front and center into the work of my foundation, the Johansson Larson Foundation. So I don't know where that's come from. I think it was a deep-seated belief that I have always carried, that it's important to give back to your community. And you can do that in all kinds of ways. Some people are involved in high-level organizing and policy work and things like that. And other people are engaged in very ordinary volunteer activities to make their communities better places. And so that's what I've done virtually my whole adult life and since I've been an adolescent.
Well, yes, and I know that you want to talk about that, but you know, there's so much in that CV. I don't have it in front of me. I'm not going to try to recap what all you've done with your life, but it's pages and pages of listings of committees that you've been on and things. In your own mind, how do you organize that, your career? Do you see yourself, do you see these various projects as in particular groups, or do you have a sense of priorities among which are the most valuable things to do? How do you mentally manage such a CV?
Well, again, a great question. And it brings to mind two things. When I applied to be a candidate for the Green Party for the next election, I had to think about that and think about what it is that is motivating me to run for the Green Party and how I would define myself. What is the story I want to tell about myself? And then the other sort of time when I've had to do that is when I've gone up for tenure. And so you have to prepare a tenure application and then promotion, and I was promoted to full professor. And I had to think again, what is the story I want to tell about me and the work that I do? And in terms of the activist work, I think there are threads that have just carried right the way through. And largely they have to do with justice. And we can talk about environmental and ecological justice has been a big part of what I do. Justice in terms of human-animal relations, and that's what I mentioned earlier, sort of that goes back to my adolescence. And then thinking about social justice and the kinds of things that we need to do as a society to realize and make true social justice for all people, regardless of the color of their skin, their religion, and so on and so forth. I think those have been guiding threads throughout my whole life. And I really haven't wavered. I haven't changed. In fact, as I've gotten older, I feel like I'm going back to my early activist roots where I didn't really care about who I would offend when I spoke out about things to do with acts of injustice or unfairness or inequity. I don't care anymore. I just think it's important that we do stand up for these things. And that kind of feels to me as if it's a united framework. Although there's many different activities I've done. I, have done volunteer work with refugees, supporting refugee resettlement here in London, and also work with ESL volunteer work with mentoring newcomers to Canada, refugees and immigrants. And I see that work is equally as important and related to the educational work that I've done, the work around the environment, and so on and so forth.
Okay, well, in terms of what you're doing now,
Yeah.
one thing is, let's talk about your candidacy.
Sure.
Because I think you are running for the Green Party, and I gather that if nobody else wants to apply for this role, you will be acclaimed. There's no need for an election because you're the only candidate. I thought didn't you say there was another candidate early on? Did that person?
There was, but that person withdrew, and apparently they decided to try and run in another riding. So that's all I've been told.
Okay, well, that was when I heard from you last. So that's why I was surprised to find that you are still a candidate. And I thought, well, you had I don't know. Anyway, it's good to know that you're still, your hat is in the ring still.
It is right now. So I'm not the candidate just yet. As of June 12th, nominations will close. And between now and June 12th, if somebody else decides to apply to be the candidate in London West, that's the riding that I live in.
Mhm.
then there will be an election by Green Party members in London West. But if nobody applies between now and June 12th, I'll be acclaimed. So I can't call myself the candidate just yet. I'm the nomination contestant.
Is that the word for it? Okay,
Yeah.
I would have called it a candidate to be a candidate or something.
Candidate in waiting.
Okay, well, let's hope you make it. And I'm wondering, what does a candidate in waiting, or a, would you call it, a nomination
Contestant.
contestant, what do you do? Do you go around trying to, do you hire a brass band and march up and down the main street? What do you do to be such a thing?
Well, you know, things are different because of COVID, obviously. But I've got to get my name out there. I have been in touch with Green Party members here in this riding to let them know who I am, what I care about, why I'm motivated to run in this riding. I've set up a Facebook page, as you know, and I post daily with various pieces of news that I share around the environment and Green Party policy, other things that are related to the Green Party. So it's getting my name out. It's name recognition right now.
Okay, do you mind sort of clarifying for me, what are the Green Party policy issues that one might dispute, or that are most debated?
Oh, well, from what I can tell, so I have to admit I'm a bit of a newbie with the Green Party. I joined the Green Party a couple of years ago, and I do find that all of my own values, what I stand for, what I believe about what it means to create a good, decent, democratic society in Canada and abroad, the Green Party policies I stand behind. So I can't really say that there's policies that I find problematic. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't run for the party. There is one that I do find problematic, and it's ironic because it's their educational policy.
Oh, really? What's that?
Well, they are calling for free tuition for higher education students, to abolish tuition. And I actually know from the research that if we're looking at that from an equity perspective, in other words, to make higher education accessible for young people who otherwise might not be able to afford to go on to university or college, abolishing tuition is not the best way to open doors. It's better to have targeted tuition programs, or offer free tuition or reduce tuition based on need. To offer free tuition right across the board, regardless of one's socioeconomic background, is very expensive, and it doesn't always result in the best equity outcomes in terms of bringing in young people who, as I said, otherwise might not be able to go to university or college because of their economic background. So that's one that I do have a little bit of a problem with. And, you know, thinking about running for a party and one has to support party policy, that one I would probably push back against. Now, the Green Party policies are developed by members, and they have a really good policy policy development process with the membership involved. But I would say there are no other Green Party policies that I wouldn't be proud to stand behind.
Now, what would happen if, in fact, you have qualms about that, and you're in an all-party candidates meeting, and somebody asks you, "What do you think about this?" To what extent would you be free to say, "Well, I don't agree with the policy, but the Green Party policy, which I will try to promote, is this, and I don't believe in it." Can you do that?
Yes, and it's the only party you can do that because we don't have a party whip. All the other parties have party whips, and you probably are aware, and other listeners to this program, that party whips literally whip party members into shape to toe party lines. It's interesting. I have this book here that I've been wanting to read for a while. I got it from the library, and it's called Tragedy of the Commons, and it's exit interviews with MPs who've been turfed out of political parties, namely, I think, the Liberal and Conservative parties, for not towing party line. And And I think we see that very clearly with the current federal government, the Liberal government right now. If you do not toe the party line, you are either demoted or kicked out of caucus and have to become a backbencher. That is not the case with the Green Party. They do not have a system like that. Mm-hmm. That being said, if one is running for a party and a member of a party, one would assume that you would support party policies. And as I said, I stand behind the Green Party policies, whether they're policies around the environment, guaranteed basic income, the whole range of things to do with the economy and otherwise. I have absolutely no problems with them, and I agree with them, except for that little one about tuition.
Okay. But later this week, I have an interview. I'm going to have a talk show with Lois Wilson about universal basic income.
Oh, great! Yeah, great topic. Mm-hmm. The NDP's come a long way with that, but I think the Green Party policy. I haven't got my Green Party hat on right now. Is stronger about a guaranteed livable income. And there's been people working in that area for decades with solid research about the outcomes of guaranteed or basic livable income programs.
Yes, I've seen some of that research, and it's impressive.
It is.
Now, back to this education policy, I noticed that the US now, I believe it's Biden officially, and I could be mistaken, but it was only a day or two ago when I was falling asleep that I heard this or something, but that the community college, he's promoting the idea of having all community colleges be free. Now, I heard somebody else say that that wasn't necessarily the best solution because you want to have also better access to universities, that a community college can be kind of a dead end, and it may be a place for and maybe that's more in the US than here, I don't know, but that it may largely be remedial, people who should have got better training in high school or they forgot it along the way, and it doesn't necessarily lead to better jobs or directly funnel into other higher institutions.
Right.
Education.
I'm not sure that's the case in Canada. I know that community colleges in Canada offer many programs that lead to higher levels of employment than quite a few university academic programs. And that is not to suggest that community college programs are not academic. And I can think right now about the shortage in nurses and PSWs, and the community college here in London is offering free tuition for people who want to become PSWs, personal support workers. So there's I think there's a very important role in society for community college. And I know a number of people who have university degrees that have then gone on to do a college degree or diploma in order to increase their employability.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
In what kind of field would that be? I'll follow up.
A whole range of things. It could be project management, sort of business programs, some things in the healthcare sector, even people who then make a complete shift from what they did with their undergraduate degree to go into the trades. So it ranges, but I think there's a really important role for community colleges in both Canada, well, everywhere for that matter. I was going to say both Canada and US.
Okay, well, let's talk then about what it is that you're focusing on in terms of your community work, your volunteer work at the grassroots level, and what kinds of organizations you're supporting. I'd be interested in your work with refugees, but also eventually I want to get back to talking about your foundation a little bit.
Okay, well, happy to do all of those things. One of the programs that I've been involved in for 2 years now is called Circles, Bridges Out of Poverty. I don't know where it was founded, somewhere in the US, but it's a program that's being taken up in many communities across North America. And basically what it does, it's an initiative that brings together people who are on Ontario Works in Ontario, formerly known as welfare, who want to make a change in their life. They want to go back to school, get a job, get off of government assistance, and turn their lives around. And they are referred to as leaders. So the idea is that they're taking leadership over their lives. They have a plan, they have an idea of what they want to do, but they need support. Other people like me, for example, join and we're allies. And our job in circles is to be an ally and to support the leaders to meet the goals that they set out for themselves. So before COVID, every Monday, I would go to a local church here in London that provided a free meal for the Monday Circle group. And the Monday Circle group was about 30 of us, half leaders, half allies. And we had dinner together. We had dinner and we talked and we started to develop friendships and support and trust with one another. And then there would be an activity. There might be a speaker that would come in that would talk about community colleges in London, the community college in London and what programs they offer. One day we went down to the local library to see all the different services offered at the library. Another day we did baking together, something that we did together. And I can't tell you how transformative that has been for me and for so many of the leaders that I have come to know in my life, to hear the stories of what people who are really, really hard up and right on the edge of sometimes ending up on the street have been through and the struggles they've had. And then to listen to what they say they want to do and what they want to do to change their life, to better their life. And then to see that happen.
Really?
It's absolutely transformative. Can I share with you one story?
Sure. I want to know how long a period of time we're talking about. Are you talking about watching people for 10 years or 6 months or what?
It depends. I started Circles just over 2 years ago. So there were people who were in the program before I joined, and they are now not in the program because they've met their goals. Like, these are leaders and moved on and are successful in their lives. And there's other people that have joined more recently. So it really depends.
How many are in a circle, or does it vary?
Usually about 30, 20 to 30, sort of half leaders and half allies. And it's really about understanding the systemic barriers that people face, people who are living in poverty, working towards eliminating those barriers or addressing them, but also just working at the same time to literally support them sort of move out of the stages of poverty that they're in and better their lives.
Okay, so tell me about one.
Okay, I'm going to tell you about Carrie. So Carrie is, I think she's in her late 20s. And if you met her, like, she's a woman with lots of tattoos and piercings and everything like that. And a little bit, you might say, rough around the edges. And she has 3 kids. When I met her, one of her children had been taken away from her, was in foster care. She had one daughter who's living with her, and her son had been taken away from her and living with his father. Carrie was abused as a child, as an infant, terribly abused and put into foster homes, and went through the foster system, bounced from foster home to foster home, and then eventually was adopted by a relative in the family who raised her. And she has been a drug addict. She's lived on the street. She has tried to commit suicide many times. She has been at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the heap. But always she had this dream of being a baker. And so through Circles, she was able to complete her baking diploma through Fanshawe College here in London. She ended up doing nearly all the baking for the Junos. The Juno Awards were held in London here for a couple of years ago. And we helped to get Carrie an apartment. A bunch of Circles members, we got volunteers to furnish it for her. So she's now working full-time in a bakery here in London. She loves her job. Her daughter, who was in a foster home, is now living with her. She sees her son more regularly, and she still has her younger daughter with her. Her life has been completely transformed. And just to see that and to sort of be a part of that journey is amazing, because it's so easy to look at people who are down and out and engage in blaming them. They're not smart enough, strong enough, hardworking enough, whatever. But when you actually hear those stories about what, an individual like that's been through, I just see her through the lens of resilience. absolute resilience.
What if she were asked what was the most important contribution that this circle made to her? What was it that she needed to break this cycle of bad events? And how did you get her out of that, or how did she get out of it?
I think one of the biggest things is just believing that you can make a change, believing that you're able, that you're capable of making a change in your life. If you grow up in a family, and I've seen this as a teacher, when I was a teacher in Toronto, I taught kids that were so smart, so bright, but they didn't see it. They'd been told that they were stupid, that they were not going to amount to anything. They certainly weren't told that they were able to go to college or university. If you hear those messages your whole life, you believe them, just as with anything. So I think Circles provides a different narrative, a narrative for people who don't have any hope, that there are options out there, and also access to resources. You know, where do you, things that people who have been engaged in post-secondary education know easily, like how do you access tuition supplements or grants or bursaries? You know, how do you apply for a program? All these kinds of things. I think Circles does a really good job of providing for the leaders in the circle. So that, I mean, I could give you many other examples. That's just one that stands out. But I think it's at the heart of it, it's about relationships and building a supportive.
This doesn't involve therapy.
No, it's not therapeutic at all. And none of us allies are trained to do this. We literally have dinner together. We sit down and have dinner, and we spend an evening together with people, and we listen to one another.
Right. Who are the allies besides you?
Oh gosh, a whole range of people. A lot of retired people. Obviously, they have more time to do volunteer work. There are some people who are newcomers to London, immigrants themselves, and just want to engage and get to know others in the city. People from the business world. There's a man who's doing a social justice degree at King's College here in London. So a whole range of people. Mm-hmm. I would say just people who really want to give back to their community in some way.
Is there some sort of training program beforehand so that people know the drill?
Yes, absolutely. And an education about poverty and the systemic nature of poverty and the systemic reasons why people remain impoverished in our society. So we learn about that as well, and policies, different supports that are available in London through the Goodwill, other agencies, and so on and so forth.
Are there plans, or is it already underway, to expand this kind of project to other cities? It's
all over the place. Yeah, Circles exists in many communities. I'm sure there are loads of Circles in Toronto.
They're all in Canadian society.
No, in the US too. I think it started in the US, to be honest. Yeah. So when you have a chance, just Google and watch some videos of leaders who've been transformed through the Circles program. It's pretty remarkable to see.
Okay, what'd you do during COVID? How did you maintain any kind of contact with these people?
We have our Monday meeting through Zoom, and it's not the same, obviously. There are things that I do on a regular basis for some of the Circles members. I go visit them, and outside of their homes, maybe bring them some food, or I'm a big gardener. So right now I've been delivering a lot of plants from my vegetable garden to different Circles members, leaving them outside their homes, having a little distant hello. So it's been very hard, very hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. So you've already briefed me on something I have no familiarity with at all. Now, tell me a little bit about the work with refugees. These are people coming into Canada from what kind of backgrounds, and what is your own experience along those lines with them?
So my most recent experience has been with something called the Ecumenical Refugee Support Committee here in London. So it's a group of people from different churches who come together to sponsor refugee families. You might know that Canada has a private refugee sponsorship system where groups of people or organizations, churches, for example, if they raise enough money, They agree to sponsor a family and support that family for the first couple of years as they resettle or settle into their lives in Canada. So what that means is we have sponsored a number of different refugee families, some from Burma or Myanmar. They're called Karen. They're Karen, for the Karen refugee.
Yes, I used to work with a lot of Karens.
Yeah. So we've resettled a number of Karen families here in London. There was another family from Ethiopia as well that we helped to resettle. So what does that mean? It means that we apply to, oh my gosh, I can't remember who we apply to, but I guess it's the federal government agency that oversees refugee sponsorships. And then we wait, and once we get the okay that a family is coming, we do fundraising all the time, basically, to raise money for this family, and we have a bank account. Then we find an apartment, and then we scramble around and we get lots of donations of furniture, and we furnish the apartment, and then we basically work with the local community of the background of the refugee family that's coming, to make sure that everything that we do would be the most suitable for that family in terms of what they would expect and what they would need based on their culture, their religious background, and so on and so forth. And then we work with them. You know, I have worked with families to help their kids get registered in school, help them learn English, show them where English ESL programs are in London, help them buy groceries, get a bus pass, open a bank account, all those kinds of things. So that's another sort of piece of what I do. And I think it's great that Canada has private sponsorships. I think most refugees that come to Canada are privately sponsored as opposed to sponsored by the government. It's a big financial commitment. But then once they're settled and employed, then the group, my group, for example, the sponsorship group, is released of their sponsorship responsibilities, and the family is integrated into Canadian society.
So you have worked so far with one Karen family, or what's your own history of working with these people?
Yeah, there was one Karen family that I was involved in, and then, as I said, this other Ethiopian family that had spent time in a refugee camp outside of Ethiopia, actually, but I can't remember all the details. They ended up moving to Calgary in the end. They had they had relatives out there, and they felt that they would be better able to integrate and have the supports they need in Calgary than in London.
Okay, I've had a lot of contact with Karens, but back 15 years or so ago. And I wonder if they're still coming as refugees, because I think that Karen, they may have made a ceasefire, or probably they've given it a better name than that, but some sort of accommodation with the government. And then, of course, the real problem has been that the government has itself gone through hell and is now in the hands of really a bunch of thugs. So I just wonder what's happened to all these tribal groups other than the Burmans.
Yeah, well, sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say, my understanding is that many Karen refugees went to Thailand, and they're living in refugee camps there. And the Thai government is very reluctant to allow them to be designated, to have the official refugee designation that when the UN designates somebody as a refugee. And the reason is that they want them to go back to Burma. They don't want them to stay in Thailand. And so these people in these camps, many have been living there 20, 30 years. I mean, it's crazy. They're stuck. They're stuck because they can't get this designation that would enable them to be able to come to countries like Canada, claiming refugee status. And neither can they go back to their homes, and they're not able to integrate into Thai society. So it's a complex situation. And I'm not doing justice to it at all. Forgive me, but it's not something that I've been thinking about for a while.
I remember a lot about those early period. I hope that they're not as bad now. I think the Thai government was trying to, do something to move them into a different situation. But I was working with a man who was a refugee in Canada. He wasn't a refugee. He was not able to get papers because he had been a well, what I want to call him. He was working with the Karen resistance movement in the jungle. He was a soldier. Frankly, he was a sniper. and he was a real soldier until he defected and came to Canada after something like 20 years. But his family, I saw the photo of it. They were in Thailand, and there was a big blue tarp. It was like something that you would put on your floor if you were painting to keep, that kind of plastic. And it was over a clothesline. So they'd made a tent out of this piece of blue plastic. And they were living under this, this little thing. And they were there for, I think, 10, 12 years. Before they were able to get out. Then they came to the US and they couldn't come to Canada, and he couldn't go to the US for a while because he would be losing his ability to come back to Canada and so on. It was just awful. Then, of course, Aung San Suu Kyi becomes victorious and looks like she's a heroine for a few years, and everybody's celebrating, and Canada is just whooping it up because of this wonderful change of government. Mm-hmm. And he gets established here as I think he's a citizen now, and he's in travel and all this stuff. But then the whole thing goes down the drain in a sense because Aung San Suu Kyi supports the army. Mm-hmm. So it's a real roller coaster in that country. And I am not at all sure what has happened to all these Karen people that I used to know. It's they get lost in the shuffle because we had to start paying much more attention to the Rohingya. Mm-hmm. And the Karens and all the other people were lining up with the government and with Aung San Suu Kyi saying that the Rohingyas are the bad guys. It's, there are no angels and saints. They're just a bunch of human beings who make sometimes very difficult and stupid decisions. So,
yeah. Very, very true. And I think for the Karen people that they really have been left behind. And in terms of government policy, I mean, there was just so much focus over the last few years, both on Rohingya and Syrian refugees that, there was a hierarchy that developed who was in more dire straits than others. And we forgot about the Karen people and many who still live in refugee camps.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So if we had all our act together, we'd be paying attention to a lot more people than we do. Let's move on and talk about some of your other projects. What's highest on your list? You're interested in animals.
I am interested in animals, but I want to talk about trees for a minute. Can I talk about trees?
Boy, trees and I are real friends. I love trees.
So I don't have a lot to say about this, but I've kind of embarked in a bit of a crazy way in this idea of planting native trees and native plants and native flowers in my garden. I have about a half an acre here in London, and mainly because of primarily because of the environment and issues to do with the climate crisis, and thinking I have to do something in my little piece of land here. So I'm pretty keen about that. And we have a great organization here in London called Reforest London, and they frequently offer free trees. I think I planted 20 trees in my property last year, and I've planted about 6 so far this year. It's a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, if there are any more gold stars in my teaching kit, I would give you 2 or 3 for that one.
But I'm very concerned about what's happening out in BC right now in Fairy Creek. You probably know about that, and the forest defenders defending the old growth forests. There's about 3% of Vancouver Island that has these old growth, hundreds of years old trees and some thousands that are being logged. And There are about 160 people out there right now, as far as I know, who literally are chaining themselves to these trees and doing what they can to protect them. So I think that's pretty awesome. I'd
Yeah.
like to believe that if I was there, I would be there at Fairy Creek as a land defender, but I'm not. So the best I can do is plant a couple of little spindly trees in my own backyard.
I saw a Facebook image that really was so arresting. It was a man lying sort of face down on the stump of a tree that had been cut. And he was, you know, stretched out full length, but he only came about 2/3 of the way across the diameter of that stump.
Yeah,
So
I
that
think
tree had to have been 250 or 300 years old.
I know. I
And
know.
you think a critter that has lived that long and we come along and make toilet paper out of it? Sorry, but you know, it's hard to tolerate that. But also, I'm really convinced that for global warming, the most important things that we can do, the most productive, affordable, and beneficial things that we can do involve plants, and not just forests, but also agriculture. That carbon enriching farming is the way to go. But certainly, you know, a couple of years ago, I was very interested in the notion that came out of, I think, Zurich. There's a group of researchers there who actually tried to figure out how many trees there are in the world.
Oh.
They did, you know, scientific vision of certain plots and estimated from that. And so, and they figured out there are 3 trillion trees on the planet. And we need about 1 or 2 trillion more to bring our carbon back into the right balance.
Okay.
And, but to get 2 trillion more, to get 1 trillion more, we have to plant at least 2 trillion. Because they don't, you know, they don't survive. Trees, you can plant them and they may or may not live. So question is, how can you plant 2 trillion trees? Well, Canada, I think, has promised to plant 2 billion. Well, a trillion is 1,000 billion. So if another 999 countries promise to plant 2 billion trees, then we may get there. But I don't think there are 999 other countries.
Right.
So, you know, so my notion is, and the other problem is, you can't plant them just everywhere. I mean, who's going to go out to the top of a mountain where there's space to do it? You know, roads getting there. How are you going to get people to plant them and so on? Well, I think one of the things that we ought to be doing is what you're doing, which is turning our lawns into forests.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree.
Yeah, and because lawns are extremely bad for the environment. You know, they're terrible for the environment, for global warming, especially. Yes. And so I think that if we get rid of our lawns, and we should plant trees that are, as you've done, indigenous varieties, plant them close together so they can
support one another.
Support each other, yeah. Have you read that wonderful book about, I don't know, is it called The Secret Life of Trees?
I have, yes, it's beautiful.
Is
How
it?
they communicate with one another, and yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful book. So
Oh,
it changes how you think about trees.
So where are you planting your trees?
Mostly in my backyard, but some in the front yard too. So as I said, I've got about half an acre here. So it's a bit of a jungle in the back. I've got a good sized vegetable garden. We do have some grass, I have to admit, because we like to play croquet in the evenings. But yes, that is something that's near and dear to my heart. And Reforest London has a commitment to plant 1 million trees in London, I think by the next year. And they've been doing that for about 10 years now. So they count all the trees. And yes, you're right, that we need to have many more countries making those commitments. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, haven't India and China really taken the lead with tree planting as well?
China, I know in particular. India, I don't know how they're doing it in terms of the government organizing it, but I know that there's some guru, some religious figure who has a movement to plant trees. And
Yes.
he gets, they provide these little pots of trees and so on, and the children go out and plant them. I wonder how well they're being looked after, because for the first year or two, you got to water them. And mhm.
That's what
Are
I'll
you
be
watering
doing.
your trees? How are you taking care of your trees?
I'm watering my trees, and thankfully it rained yesterday, so that took a little bit of a load off me. I was down at the vigil in London yesterday. You probably have heard about what happened here, the Muslim family that was murdered. So
Absolutely awful. I was just reading the Globe and Mail, and it's full of the story of this Muslim family. This
yeah.
was a hate crime, right? This was somebody who had it in for Muslims, right?
Well, we don't know a lot about him, but I know that one of the witnesses saw him sped up and to hit this family. They were walking on the sidewalk. I know exactly the area that they were in. So they were just out for an evening stroll on Sunday night. Absolutely horrific. And they had a vigil, and thousands of people were here in London yesterday at one of the mosques. The vigil was held outside, but the whole main street that the mosque is on was completely blocked for blocked off from traffic for many blocks. And all the politicians from all the levels of government and every political party, they were all here making their speeches. So that was my evening yesterday. Very, very tragic.
It is. And I wonder, I've been hearing more about anti-Asian feeling of discrimination during the COVID thing. And I don't know why, unless it's because of the notion that somehow China was responsible for COVID or something. But I don't, I really don't understand why there are waves of misogyny and of xenophobia and all of these prejudices.
Mhm.
We're, I think, in a very bad wave, and I don't know whether Canada's experiencing it the same as other places, but looks to me like it's kind of global in scope.
I'm not sure it's a wave meta. I think it's always been there. I think incidents like these, which, as I said, are absolutely horrific. They shake us up, as they should, and seem like these one-off things. And it happened in Montreal not too long ago, the details of which I can't remember right now. But I think that people of color, racialized backgrounds, they live their daily lives being victims or experiencing forms of abuse, discrimination, prejudice. I think that just goes on all the time. And so it's, in some ways, I mean, it's horrible what happened, but it's not entirely surprising, I would say. The fact that what I do find surprising.
I mean, I'm surprised because I mean, if you think back to the Obama period, I was celebrating, thinking, well, we're over the hump. We've got past the worst of racism, and now society's integrating. I didn't see that much of it then. Of course, that's when the Tea Party began. But how much of that was in Canada at the time? There was this massacre of young women, but that was an anti-women, anti-female hostility. I don't know whether racism is, we ought to measure it. I've heard that anti-Semitism is on the upsurge too. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. And they're all forms of hate. I was talking to my son yesterday, who will be 14 next month. And, he was saying, we were talking about what happened in London to this Muslim family. And then the conversation turned to George Floyd and what happened in the US to Floyd. And I said, it's the same thing. Somebody that puts his knee on George Floyd's neck, a police officer, and kills him, doesn't think his life is of value, thinks that he's lesser than other people because of the color of their skin. And the guy that mows down a family of Muslims on the sidewalk thinks the same thing. It's that same hatred of another group of people because of the color of their skin, what they wear, their religion, or what have you, that makes these things the same. I mean, there's different reasons for those underlying forms of prejudice and hate, but they are similar in a way.
But I doubt that you, because I certainly don't meet anybody of that persuasion. I never encounter any racism. I never, if you ask me, is there such a thing? I wouldn't know from first experience that it even existed anymore. I don't meet anybody like that. But clearly it's there. So it has something to do with the circles that we travel in, I suppose.
Absolutely. I hear from my students, who are racialized, they tell me all the time about, they're walking around on the Western campus. One of my students, Rashid, and he's South Asian background. I mean, he grew up in Canada, but he's brown skinned. And he's pulled over by a security police on the campus because they think that he's stolen a bike, and he's just walking down the road. Like, these things happen all the time to people of color, and they live in fear. Some more than others, obviously, and some places more than others. But I think that's a reality. Sadly, we've still got a lot of work to do, and I think schools are going to be the center of the solution.
Well, does your son say that he knows kids who have that kind of attitude, or would he even be in a position to know? I mean, I wonder if it is, are there certain places, certain communities where it's more widespread? I just don't know how to even, if I were going out to look for a racist, I wouldn't know where to go to look,
That's a good thing. Then you've got a good circle of people around you, and
well, it isn't, because I like to think that I can listen to people who've got different points of view, but it's the same when it comes to right-wing politics. I met in Canada, I have only met two people who favored Trump. I don't talk much about Canadian politics, but everybody talks about Trump, and I never meet anybody who's in favor of Trump. Well, that can't be that. It must be that I just don't have a very good sample of Canadians, because clearly there are a lot of people who would like Trump and who would vote for him if they had a chance.
Yeah.
So but I like to think that I can try to listen to people who have different perspectives. It's just that I don't know any to listen to.
Well, count yourself as lucky, I would say. Meta, there's somebody mowing the lawn out here. I'm going to shut my window. So
okay,
I
sure.
just turned down to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. I want to talk about your charities now.
Yes, good.
Yeah, tell me about your work, because somebody left you a pot of money, and you are now the big philanthropist lady in town, right?
I call myself an accidental philanthropist. So I kind of fell into it. I love to tell the story about the background, because it is such a great story. So my father immigrated from Denmark to Canada in the 1950s, and he made friends with a number of Danish immigrants at the time. One of them was a man called Boje, B-O-J-E, Boje Johansen. And he was quite the character, and always had these various schemes of how to make money. One time he brought a bunch of folding bicycles from Denmark and sold them in his front yard in High Park, Toronto, and so on and so forth. But Boje had a lifelong relationship with a woman who was Cree, Rose, and they ran a store up in James Bay, which is the foot of Hudson Bay, for many, many years, a big kind of department store, the only competitor to the Hudson Bay store. And they made a lot of money. And he just put it basically under his pillow. He didn't know what to do with it. He just kept making lots of money. Rose died a few years before Boje. And then in 2007, when I was pregnant with my son, My father told him that I was going to have a baby, and he was so happy for me. I hadn't seen him since I was a little girl, actually. And we talked on the phone and we had a nice conversation. And he said to me, I can't sleep at night. I've got all this money and I don't know what to do with it. And I said, oh, be quiet. I said, come on, if I had all that money, I'd just give it away to charity. Like, stop complaining. So the next day he called me up again and he said, I like your idea. I'm going to give you all my money and you just do what you want with it.
Oh my God.
So later that week, so I gave him my bank account number and he transferred the money. He actually had some of it in a bank account. $3 million appeared in my bank account. And I couldn't quite believe it because I didn't really know how much money he had. But in any case, sadly, he died shortly thereafter. I think he knew he was dying. He wasn't well at the time. And I decided in his honor, rather than just give the money all away, to start a charitable foundation. The foundation is called the Johansson Larson Foundation. Johansson is his surname, Larson is mine. And for the first 10 years of the foundation, our mandate was to provide funding to educational programs for marginalized children and youth and educational programs around the humane treatment of animals. We went through a strategic planning review process last year as a board, and we've broadened the mandate ever so slightly. Right now, our mandate is to enhance the lives of those marginalized in our communities, both human and animals, through supporting what we call inclusive initiatives that foster learning and well-being. And we have 3 priority areas for what we fund. We fund programs, learning educational programs for marginalized children and youth, for Indigenous people, and educational programs related to the humane treatment of animals or around what's called the One Health model. And I know you know about that, Betta, but it's thinking about the connections between human and animal health and human and animal well-being.
Mm-hmm. That is so important, especially now. I think we're not, nobody knew about it until COVID came along. And I think the fact that, that COVID probably or maybe came from an animal,
Yep.
Made people aware of this. Yeah, we've got to think about the fact that viruses migrate from people to animals and vice versa.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah.
And so one of the planks in our platform for survival is to promote awareness of the One Health approach.
That's great. Yeah, I think that is amazing. And I think it's really, really important.
I'm going to have another conversation with a woman named Laura Kahn, who's an expert on that in another couple of weeks. She's ahead of something called the One Health approach, I believe it's called. And she's working on things like one of the odd factors of that is that when you have antibiotics and you consume it, and then you have waste products that go on the soil, the antibiotics get in the soil, and apparently it means that it's destroying certain bacteria that should be in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So it affects the entire environment, not just the animals that are fed. Animals are fed antibiotics to fatten them, except where they pass laws saying they shouldn't do that. So, it has implications that would never have occurred to me, that you actually can ruin the soil so that the soil isn't fertile in the same way it should be.
Right.
So very, very strange array of issues that come from that kind of awareness. So do you, what is your connection to the One Health? Do you have anybody working on that or what?
Well, we've in the past and continue to fund a number of, so we as a foundation provide funding to registered charities. They apply. We have actually applications are due next week. And then we decide which ones that we fund. So some of the organizations that do work around the One Health model are mostly around programs that support well-being for humans and animals together. So I'll give you two examples. One's called Community Veterinary Outreach, CVO. And basically it's run by a woman, a vet, Michelle Lem, who did her research on pet ownership among homeless people. And her research showed that people who are homeless, who have pets, are more likely to get into stable housing and get work and have stability in their lives than homeless people without pets. And the reason is they do it for their pets. Many people who are on the street have never had or have had very few relationships that they can depend on, and except their pets. And so whenever you see a person on the street who's homeless and they have a pet, I urge you and all the listeners not to be critical, because for that person, that might be the only living being that they can rely on that gives them unconditional love. So CVO, Community Veterinary Outreach, provides pro bono vet services for homeless people and their pets. Mm-hmm. And they have pop-up clinics. They run in Toronto, in homeless shelters, Halifax, all cities in Canada. And so you'll see these vets, they'll come in a day, and people who are homeless or at risk of being homeless, living on the edge of poverty, can bring their pets. And while they're having their pets treated, rabies shots, getting their teeth cleaned, the vet will say, how are you doing? What's your health like? And the person might say, you know what, I need to see a dentist. And there'll be a dentist over there who will say, look, we'll offer our free services for dental work for you. Or somebody involved in public housing, how can we get this person housed? Or somebody involved in healthcare and other aspects of well-being. In other words, it's a wraparound service that supports well-being of the animal, the pet, the dog, the cat, and the person. And I think it's a wonderful model. It's had so much success, and it really shows that we need to attend to those connections between relationships between humans and animals. I know we're running out of time, but if anybody's interested, check out my website, Johansson Larson Foundation, jlfoundation.ca, and you can read about all kinds of programs like that are going on.
I'll put this at the end of the video with a little title page so we can direct people to you. This has been such fun, and it's so enriching to me to know that you've done such wonderful things with your life since I was close to you. We don't see each other that often, but it's just a real delight. And
well, thank you, Anna. It's been a delight.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Nice